Hi, Carbon Chess Coach here again. Welcome back to my Sicilian Repertoire series. The focus of this video will be the move 6, Bishop D3, and the deviations to follow. E4, C5, Knight F3, E6, D4. These moves we already know already. Entering the Sicilian Kan. And here, move 6, Bishop D3. The main drawback of this move is it cuts the connection between the queen and the knight on D4, leaving the knight on D4 unprotected. We exploit this fact by playing the move Knight C6. They have several moves here. We'll first look at the move Bishop E3, simply protecting the knight on D4. We continue development with the move Knight F6. They have two main deviations, Queen E2 and Castle. We look at Castle first, and we simply try to complete our development as quickly as possible, using the move Bishop D6, hitting the H2 pawn. White has several ways of dealing with this threat, but we'll look at the move H3 first, and then moving the attack pawn. We play the move B5. This is an important move in the Sicilian. This move very often is given priority to the move Castle for many reasons. The move B5 keeps flexibility with the king, as the king can stay in the center or flee to the king's side at a moment's notice if necessary. The second reason for the move B5 being given priority is the fact that chess is a time-based game, meaning we only have one move per turn. We should use this time as efficiently and as effectively as possible. Let's critically assess the differences between the two moves. B5 is made in connection with aggressive intent, such as misplacing the knight on C3 with the move B4 and playing Bishop B7, targeting the E4 pawn indirectly and putting pressure on the opponent. On the other hand, castling does not put any pressure on White's position. Based on this analysis, our assessment should lead us to the move B5 being superior to the move castle. Moving on, White has many decisions to make. The first one we will look at is the move Knight takes C6. Here we can play the move Queen takes C6, as there are no tricks with Knight D5 as there are in some variations of the Sicilian Kan. A3, simply preventing B4. Bishop B7, we're putting pressure along the diagonal. A8 to H1. White generally plays either Bishop D4 or Queen E2 here. We look at the move Queen E2. We castle. F4, threatening to play the move E5, and we simply block the pawn from advancing with the move E5 ourselves. If F5, we trade the dark square bishops, as White has placed many of their pawns on light squares, leaving the dark squares very weak. We'll finish the variation here. Our play will come by bringing the rooks to the center of the board and aiming to play D5, neutralizing our weakness on the D7 square and also playing against White's dark squares. Let's go from the beginning and analyze how we deal with deviation at move 12, Bishop D4. We have E4, C5. I'll flip through these moves very quickly. And now the move Bishop D4. The idea here is to play the move E5. Black simply responds with E5, blocking the E4 pawn from moving. and the bishop goes back to e3, we play bishop c5, and eventually, after completing development, we will break with the move d5, as we have all of our pieces preparing this pawn break. Let's continue looking at more deviations. Instead of move 10 knight to c6, white might try to go ultra aggressive with the sack on b5. This just looks scary at first sight, but we should confidently snack on this piece after taking more pieces off the board. So we first play the intermezzo, knight takes d4, and they recapture, then we snack on the bishop. As we well know, the side that is up material should seek to reduce the opponent's attacking resources and simplify the position by piece trades. Knight takes b5, forking the bishop and the queen. So we play check first, saving the bishop, and then queen b8, removing the queen from the attack. a4, simply guarding the knight. We play bishop e5, gaining the tempo up from the queen and removing it from the attack of the king. Here, we play bishop a6, targeting the knight. We play f4, then we go bishop c7, and now our position is safe. Black is clearly better. Going back to move 10, if white simply plays any normal developing move, we just complete our development with the move bishop b7. At some point we could castle, and in the future, if the knight on c6 is not traded, we go to e5 and target the bishop on d3. After move 9 bishop d6, white can try blocking the line to the h3 pawn with the move f4, threatening e5, forking the knight on f6 and the bishop on d6. This move looks outwardly aggressive, but black has provoked white into playing this, as it significantly weakens white's position. Notably, e4 can no longer be defended by a pawn, so it's weaker, and now the king is weak along the g1 a7 diagonal. Black deals with the threat of the fork with the move bishop c5. This move is strategically correct, as black has less space and should seek minor piece trades. White may try knight f5, attacking the g7 pawn. Black simply trades on e3. The knight must recapture and play d6, defending the e5 square, not allowing white to clamp with the move e5 themselves. Eventually, black could get multiple along the dark squares with moves like queen b6. The position here is totally equal. Instead of knight f5 at this point, white could also try a move like bishop e2, simply allowing the queen to guard the knight on d4. Black has the move queen b6, putting pressure along the dark squares. Knight a4, and the excellent move bishop takes d4. If white goes to take the queen, then black gets 3 pieces for the queen. And black is better here, as the 3 pieces are stronger than the queen in this position. After the move bishop d6 again, white can first take on c6. We take with the d pawn, generally in this position, and positions similar, as we want to solve our late square bishop by playing the move e5. If f4 threatens to fart, then we play e5, f5, and the queen slides across to e7, at some point preparing to move bishop c5, as this dark square bishop for white is very important, as white has all the central pawns on the light square color complex, meaning the dark squares in white's position are weak. If king h1, black can play the move bishop c5, simply trading the dark square bishops. The final deviation we will look at after the move bishop d6 is the sneaky move king h1. As black can't take on h2, as white will simply take on c6 and we recapture, then they will trap our bishop with the move g3. These sacrifices are in white's favor, as our queen will simply neutralize with the move queen f3. White is winning. Going back, we should not be enticed to take the pawn on h2, but simply play the move bishop f4. If the strategic threat of taking on e3, and black generally should seek endgames, as endgames in the Sicilian are known to be better for black, based on the strategic trumps. Following logically, if we move queen d2, we can take on e3. If the queen recaptures, queen b6, putting more pressure on the dark squares. If knight f5, we simply trade down and play the move b5. And we will get our normal counterplay with the move bishop b7 and attacking the e4 pawn. Black is perfectly fine in this position. Okay, this sums up all the main deviations after move 7 bishop e3. In the bishop d3, bishop e3 setup, white can also choose the castle queen side. Let's go over the moves. e4, c5, knight f3, e6, d4, c takes d, knight c3, queen c7, we go bishop b3 now, knight c6, and they play bishop e3, simply guarding the knight. We play knight f6, continuing development, and now they go queen e2, preparing to castle long. We play the move bishop d6, they castle, and we play the key move bishop e5, starting to seek out the play in the center, and then the queen side dark squares. Now, knight takes c6 is basically forced, as any other knight move would lead to bishop takes c3, simply breaking the structure around white's king. We can easily follow up here with the move d5, neutralizing white's central space. Going back, knight takes c6 is forced, and we play b takes. Importantly, we have the move d5 that could come in the future, and also white has already committed the king to the queen side, so the half open b file would be a good avenue for counterplay. Knight a4, preventing the threat of bishop takes c3. Rook b8, simply keeping the eye on b2. It has two main moves here, the move b3, simply removing the pawn on b2 from the attack of black's pieces. Black neutralizes white's space with the move d5. Bishop c5, preventing black from castling. Black plays knight d7, hitting the bishop. Bishop a3. Now the move bishop d6, simply seeking to trade the dark square bishops and to get castled. White has dark square weaknesses around their king, so the trade of dark square bishops is good for black here. If we go back, the move g3 is also possible, preparing to get white kingside pawns moving. Rook b4, continue the undefended knight. If f4, we just take on a4. They take on e5, and we recapture on e5 with good counterplay. If instead of the move f4, they play b3, then we sacrifice the exchange, breaking white's queen side, and play queen d6 with the threat of queen a4, queen b2 mate. Black is totally fine here and has the initiative. As he moves c3, it's forced, and black can simply regain some material. After move 6, knight c6, white does not have to play the move bishop e3. They have other decent deviations. We will now look at how to meet these other deviations. The first one we'll look at is the capture on c6. As we know, d takes c is our move. White castles, and we solve our light square bishop immediately if we move e5. f4, challenging our e5 pawn, we just continue development. If they take, we just play bishop c5, developing with tempi. Then knight g4, eyeing the dark squares. Bishop f4, we can just simply play bishop e6. We don't want to go knight f2, allowing complications. Bishop e6, queen f3, and we castle along. And we have great development. And at some point, we can easily just take back the pawn on e5. If we go back slightly, at this point, f5, also playable, is met with the same bishop c5, king h1, we play b5, that's similar structure as before. We go a4, we play bishop b7, and we'll simply develop our play as normal. Against white center, maybe the rook will come to d8, we'll castle at some point. We know the plans here already. Another deviation after the move knight c6. Is the move knight d e2. Way too passive. We just continue development. The castle, we play b5, bishop pawn to a3. It's just simply prevented b4, And we get on with the task. We just develop our pieces, prevent e5 here, as f4 threatened to play e5, the strategic threat, and we have a wonderful position. This position is nothing to talk about. Last variation we'll look at is the move knight b3. This makes sense as white has more space, so they avoid trades. We play the move b5, white castles. If a3, we just simply develop, and a3 sometimes could be a hook. So if we go back, knight b3, b5, they play a3. Sometimes it could be a hook for the pawn on b4 to help us open the position if necessary in the middle game. So we just go with castle, knight f6, f4. There's no bishop c5 here as the knight is on b3. So we just simply play d6, getting the hedgehog structure. Queen f3. And we simply continue development with bishop b7. They have two main moves here, bishop e3 or bishop d2. If bishop e3, we go bishop e7, work a, e1, and knight b4, gaining the pair bishops. And here our center is quite solid, so we could use the tempo to gain this strategic trump, and then eventually we just castle and be quite fine. Let's go back. Here they had to move bishop d2. Now we must be careful here. These same knight b4 ideas don't work as well. Let's see. Bishop e7, rook e1. We should castle here. Not knight b4, as knight b5 was the whole point of this variation. If we simply castle, we're quite fine here. The position is roughly equal. Let's now see how Grandmaster Alonzo Zapata takes apart his opponent, Rafel Mendoza, in 29 moves. We have e4, c5, and f3. Our normal can move Varda, queen c7, and Rafel here goes for the bishop d3, bishop e3 setup. Bishop d3, knight c6, bishop e3. The f6, we already know these moves. White castles here, bishop d6, gaining the tempo of the h2 pawn. White now captures on c6. Zapata now captures the knight on c6, f4. e5, solving the light square bishop on c8, and also preventing the threat of e5. f5, queen e7. Now, let's take a look at this position. White has all their central pawns on light squares. What does this mean for the pieces? The d3 bishop is now what we consider a bad bishop, and the e3 bishop is their good bishop. But I prefer to call this bishop an important bishop, as it has a role of defending all the dark squares in white's position. We should note the center is no longer under tension, meaning black's king can spend some time in the center, as there is only one open file in the center and it is of no use at this point. Black's king is completely safe in the center, and black may use this fact to gain other positional trumps before committing the king to any one side. King h1, h6, simply preventing bishop g5 at any point. a4. Now, we must understand that black's weaknesses are along the dark squares, and white intends to fix these weaknesses with the move a5. Black does not allow white to fix their weaknesses by playing the move a5, preventing the move a5 by white. Knight b1, knight is rerouted, and black now seeks to trade white's important bishop with the move bishop c5. Bishop d2, b6, simply allowing the light square bishop some room. Knight a3. Black has no other improving moves at the moment, so black makes move castle. Queen e2. Rook d8, improving the rook, putting it on a half open file. Bishop e1, and a brilliant strategic concept by black. Bishop takes a3, rook takes a3, and he moves c5. Now, why does black give up the dark square bishop? What is this about? The idea is white's main weakness, although now protected, is the pawn on e4. The knight on c3 was capable of defense against e4, but by trading the bishop for the knight can no longer defend the e4 square, which is a light square, and white's dark square bishop cannot help in defense of the e4 pawn, as dark square bishops can't help on light squares. The knight may have been able to maneuver to help a pawn on e4, but black is simply intending to crash through on the light squares. Bishop b7, maybe rook d4, and let's see how the game progresses. Bishop h4, bishop b7, rook a1, rook d4, and over the last few moves, the e4 pawn has been targeted. c3. Now, this move attacks the rook, but it creates significant weaknesses. The pawn, when on c2, held together the d file, so there were no penetration points for white. But because the pawn is on c3 now, the bishop is under-defended, and black will be able to use the open d file for penetration. Rook d6, rook d1, rook a d8, occupying the open file. Bishop c2, trying to neutralize the pieces by the cost of a pawn. Rook takes, rook takes, rook takes, and bishop takes e4. Now, if bishop takes e4, black can simply play knight takes with the fork on f2. Let's look at the variation. Take, knight takes, bishop takes, and black is winning. So because of this, bishop takes f6 was played. Bishop takes c2, intermezzo. Bishop takes e7, bishop takes a4, and after f6, black flips another pawn. Here, white throwing the towel. Let's now look at another game by Grandmaster Zapata, this time against Chami, Ibarra. e4, c5, knight c3, not going directly into the open Sicilian, but making move order deviations. e6, knight f3, a6, b4, bringing us back to the open Sicilian. Bishop d3, we know when the bishop goes to d3, leaving the knight unguarded, we play knight c6, knight takes c6, d takes, 99.9% of the time, best for capture. castle, and we solve our worst placed piece, the bishop on c8, with the move e5. f4, we simply develop king h1, bishop d6, f5, and there's no need to play queen e7 here, as there's no bishop on e3 to trade. So we just continue, as the center is relatively closed. We play b5, queen f3, bishop b7. These moves are higher valued at move castle. a4, seeking to attack our pawn chain. Black plays h6, preparing to develop, because on the move castle, here, bishop g5 could be quite annoying, as now either black has to go back with bishop e7, put the queen in an uncomfortable position with queen e7, walking directly into a pin. Maybe allowing white to break the structure with bishop takes f6. None of these moves are favorable for black, and if black does not want to allow any of these, the knight has to lose its great position on f6, where it pressures the e4 pawn. So h6 was played, rook d1, and black castle. Now, Alonzo's opponent goes ultra aggressive with the move g4. The Grandmaster now plays knight h7, simply holding up the move g5. f6, going ultra aggressive. Black takes. White uses the tactics in the position to take on h6. And bishop e7. Now the knight is guarded. The threat is actually to take on h6. So white simply goes back, and black seeks going to play in the center with rook d8, rook g1, trying to prosecute the kingside attack, knight h7, still holding up white's play on the king side, knight e2, bringing pieces across to the king side, and black goes c5, intending to move c4. White plays knight g3, black goes c4. Now, white's play is being generated on the king side. Black is trying to use central queen side strategy. There's a general rule: an attack on the wing is met in the center of the board. And this is exactly what the Grandmaster is proving. Bishop e2, knight g5. Improving the knight. The knight went back to e6, looking at all the weaknesses white has created. Right, f1, and black seeks to trade pieces. Trading minor pieces when you're under attack is generally a good strategy. The more pieces you take off, the less pieces the opponent has to attack you with. Bishop takes c5, queen takes c5. And if we look at the position, the pawns being on light squares state to us dark squares are weak. Knight h5, still trying to get some play on the king's side, but white does not have any coordination as yet. Knight g5, trading the sights on the e4 pawn, bishop f3. Now white is being driven passive. Queen e3, intended penetration with rook d2. knight g3, rook d2, knight f5, and more pieces come off the board. The problem with white's attack was when they pushed the pawns, they left themselves strategically weak. So taking off the pieces was the best idea, and the Grandmaster played this position brilliantly. Bishop takes e4, knight h4, f5. Saying no counterplay, white here resigned. Now look at one more game example between Najer and Shaposhnikov. e4, c5, knight f3, e6, knight c3. So in this game, white does not go directly into the open Sicilian, but attempts to enter by another move order. a6, d4, and now we have our mainline Kan. Bishop d3, play knight c6, sitting the knight on d4, and in this game, white chose to take on c6. D takes c, castle, e5, solving our worst placed piece. The light square bishop, knight f6, king h1, just stepping off the diagonal, as in this position the dark squares are weak, so white just tucks his king away off of the weak diagonal. Bishop d6, solidifying the e5 pawn, f5, gaining space on the king's side, but removing the central tension. b5, as there is no tension in the center, black gets along with the queenside counterplay. a4, attacking the structure, trying to prove that black's queenside space can be undermined and made into overextension. Bishop b7, simply developing. A takes b5, a takes b5. We don't want to play c takes, as this would weaken the d5 square. So a takes, rook takes, bishop takes, bishop e3, and we would note that the center is still solid, no tension, so black decides to improve the other pieces before castling. So bishop e7, this is part of black's strategic plan. We'll see how it unfolds. Queen f3, and knight goes back to d7. Great attempt to c5 or b6, probably later jump to c4, or from c5 it could target the d3 bishop. There's a saying that even bad bishops defend good pawns. The e4 pawn is white's main weakness in the position, but it is held together by the d3 bishop. Queen g3, black simply plays bishop f6. Knight b1, trying to reroute the knight as it had no potential on the c3 square. Black castles, finally. Knight d2, rook b8. This move looks strange, but what it does is guards the b5 pawn, so eventually black may get in c5, bringing this bishop that looks very dormant on a8 into life. Queen f2, simply eyeing the dark squares. Bishop e7, preparing c5 at some point and stopping any of white's pieces from using the c5 square. And also preparing knight c5. Queen goes to e2, knight c5, hitting the bishop that is trapped, And black's strategic plan is to really take off this bad bishop by white. Why are we taking off the bad bishop? Because when we take the bishop, the e4 pawn becomes a whole lot weaker if white recaptures with the queen. Alright, if white recaptures with the c pawn, and the structure has changed, and now the e4 pawn is not the main weakness, but the weakness will be on the b3 square. Rook f3, that just takes off on d3. C takes. Now this pawn is extremely weak and it can easily be targeted along the d file. Moves like queen d7 or rook d8, those sort of moves. And maybe at some point put a bishop along the diagonal here. Looks a little artificial and imaginary, but maybe in future we could get something looking like this. c5, rook h3. No, okay, what is white doing over here? White is not going to attack with only a lonely rook, so we must see how white is intended to coordinate. The main coordination is queen h5. And if we play h6 to guard against the main threat after queen h5, then there are some sacrifices against h6 that can be very dangerous. So black just takes all of this out one time. g6, queen f2. Maybe seeking some play along the f file. Queen d6, now eyeing the weakness. King g1, and now c4. Now, black did not break down the d3 pawn with the ideas I previously mentioned, but actually undermine the structure, because if any captures go on c4, then the e4 pawn will be weakened. Let's try to remember that pawn structure is connected. If one pawn leaves, then it influences the other pawns. Okay, d takes, c takes, and they move queen e1. Black takes on b2, white takes on c4, and queen b4. No, this e4 pawn is very weak. It cannot be defended by another pawn, and black does not have the same weaknesses as white. So black goes into a winning endgame. Knight takes e5, bishop takes e4. Pawns are about equal, but this position is far from equal. Black is clearly better. Okay, black could have taken immediately, but they played in the mezzo, rook b1, rook b2, king g3, and now only recapture. Bishop d4, rook takes g2. King f4, bishop f5. Not only is black attacking white's pieces, messing with the harmony, but also the white king is not very safe at all. Rook b3, bishop d6, pinning the knight, so f6 could be on the agenda, just attacking the pin piece. And rook c2 was played here. Also, f6 was also winning. But given the threats in the position, and black being simply up a pawn, white threw in the towel. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to pass them on in the comments below. I will be happy to answer any questions. If you like the video or found it informative, do not forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you. See you next time as we continue to build your Kan repertoire.